Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen of the 128th District in Berks County. As your representative in the State House, I've been assigned to serve on 4 committees. While each assignment is important, the one closest to my heart is the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. The committee examines issues related to our veterans and our first responders, both of whom are heroes of our communities. Joining me today to discuss some current issues before the committee is Chairman Representative Steve Barrar. Welcome to the program.
It's great to be here with you, Mark.
Thank you for joining me. A lot to discuss today, but let's talk for a moment about Steve Barrar. What's your background? I know you were a businessman.
I owned a retail garden center before getting elected, first of all as a township commissioner in my community and then to the State House. Just a lot of issues facing small businessmen or small business people in the community made me want to get more involved in politics, and it's been a great path so far.
You're very passionate about what you do here in the State House, and I'm sure you were as a businessman. Was there any trigger that said, you know what, this needs changing, this law needs adjusting?
Well, mostly the tax burdens that's placed on small business owners throughout the Commonwealth, whether they're local taxes, earned income taxes. Actually, one of the big challenges for me as a small business owner, having a retail garden center in my district, right in front of my store was a billboard that said, "Shop in Delaware, pay no taxes." And it was always difficult. People would come into my parking lot and point up to the sign, the billboard in front of my store and say, "How do you let that happen?" I said, "Well, we have a First Amendment that allows it to be there." But I would have loved to have torn it down.
Or put a tall evergreen in front of it.
I tried that. Didn't work. It wasn't my property.
Did you have a specialty, by the way, in your business there? Evergreens, perennial, seasonal, what?
Mostly bedding plants,
Okay.
like geraniums, and then during this time of year we would do poinsettias, and that was a big crop for me. It was nice to watch the greenhouses go from green to bright red over the Christmas holidays.
And you pronounce that poinsettias?
Poinsettias.
Okay. We have some in front of our fireplace, and I noted to my wife it doesn't look like they've been watered in 2 weeks, so you do have to water them. There is maintenance involved.
The plastic ones that you don't have to water. So.
Your dad was involved in government, I understand.
My dad spent 16 years as a borough councilman in a small little town called Glen, where I grew up, and just one of the most beautiful little towns to live in. But then, you know, when I had the opportunity to buy a garden center about 15 miles away from where I grew up, I took the opportunity.
Some people are drawn to what their dad or their mom, either their parents or grandparents did. Did it have a drawing power? For some people, they want to stay away from it. What was it like with you?
Well, it was funny. I always thought I wanted to stay away from it. And then upon my father's death, I always say it was probably the most profound moment of my life. And that's really, it was like, you know, a couple months after that I decided I was going to run for office and try to leave my community a little better off than I found it.
Finally, one last personal note. Did you think you understand your dad better today now that you're in government and have been involved?
It's probably the greatest compliment anyone can give me is to tell me I'm like my dad. My dad was my hero, and he was part of that World War II generation. And really understood the concept of giving back to the community. And I just hope that, you know, after my years in office, I can get the same amount of respect that was given to him by people.
Thank you for sharing your heart there. My dad, of course, was a World War II veteran as well, and I think it instills some of that passion and love for the veterans community. But you're a veteran as well. You're a Vietnam era?
I am. I'm a Navy veteran from 1973 to 75, and you know, it was an interesting time to be in the military during the Vietnam War. There was a lot of, not like today. What I love about today is we've learned our mistake from the Vietnam War. We've learned that, you know, if you disagree with the policy of the government, you don't take it out on the people who are sent to fight the war for this country. And I think that's probably the greatest thing. I love when veterans come home today and they're just treated like royalty, which is how they should be treated. And I try to make myself part of that whenever a veteran comes home from Afghanistan or Iraq or really anywhere in the country. If I'm invited to the welcome home ceremony, I take a citation from the House and a flag to present them from the state.
It's a shame because during the Vietnam era, I mean, I was out delivering newspapers. I was very familiar with the war. The draft ended before I had reached age. There was a certain stain that was associated on occasion during that period of time with Vietnam era veterans, and I think that's a great national tragedy, and I'm seeing that change significantly for the better. You were appointed chairman of the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee when?
When in 2010, when we took back the majority after the big election of 2009, we were elected to the largest Republican majority in Pennsylvania history. The Speaker of the House appointed me to that position. There were other positions available that I could have become the chairman of, but Veteran Affairs was always very, very close to my heart. And I actually kind of kicked off my political career being a little bit involved in some veteran issues in my community. And so when I saw the opportunity here, I just felt that this is where I belong, right here in the Veteran Affairs Committee.
Is there a certain amount of taming that goes with having assumed the committee chairmanship? You have a little bit of independence, you've got a little maverick. That's a healthy thing. You've got some passion and drive there. Were there some changes that Representative Barrar underwent when he became a committee chairman?
Well, I think the big thing about being the chairman is that you have some authority over the agenda that moves forward, which I think is the perfect spot for me to be, because I've always felt there were some things we were lacking in doing for our veterans, and that then allowed me to be in the driver's seat, which is, going from a rank and file member to a chairman is a pretty special thing in this building. Chairmen they get a little bit more prestige, and it's always nice when you walk the hallways and people say, "Good morning, Mr. Chairman." It's a title you've earned. It's not given to you just because you've been here longer. I think there's a neat element of respect that goes with the position, and I just love being in that position where when members like yourself come to me and have a special issue that's affecting the veterans in their community, I can get involved in it. Where as a rank and file member, it's pretty much just you're kind of myopic to your district. But being the chairman of the committee allows you to look out over all the members, because they all come to you and ask you for help with issues in the committee.
I am the secretary of the committee, so I'm not quite as myopic now. I think of nonpartisan. When I think of Veterans Affairs and the Emergency Preparedness Committee, and of course we have Democrats and Republicans in the room working together. I'm on 3 committees, and I've only been in the State House 3 years. But what I have noted is the camaraderie and the working relationship that we have in that committee on a bipartisan basis is much stronger than other committees. Your assertion on that?
I agree. You know what? When you look at who our committee helps, we help veterans, the National Guards, men and women, firefighters, paramedics, ambulance attendees, PEMA. They're all good groups to be involved with. The issues that affect them are not Republican Democrat issues. Really, for our volunteer firefighters and our EMTs, right now these are issues of survival to them. And I don't think there's a Republican way or a Democrat way to best benefit them. They need some serious legislation passed, and Chris Donato, the Democrat chairman for the committee, has been great working with me. He rarely ever gets involved in any type of partisan politics with this, and so do the members. The members all understand that our job here is to help veterans and firefighters the best way we can, and I think they all take this committee pretty seriously and keep the partisanship out of it.
I agree with you. I know when I talk to members of my constituent community and they ask me questions in terms of my party affiliation, I say to them, I've been an EMT for 25 years. I'm not running currently. I said, when I stop on the roadside and somebody needs assistance because they have a medical problem, they need to be taken to the hospital, nowhere in the conversation does partisan politics a part of that. I'm a certified state educator as well. Nowhere in that conversation does partisan politics play a role. So I appreciate that. Legislative priorities for the committee, for you personally, what's important to you? And I know we've pushed a lot of quality legislation out of the committee recently. Do you have any favorites or areas you'd like to accent or emphasize?
We've done, I think, some very serious, important legislation, such as the veteran-owned small business for veteran veteran-owned businesses and disabled veteran businesses to allow them to participate in the state government procurement opportunities that exist out there. I think, with small businesses struggling the way they are, and I think veteran-owned businesses are at a little bit of a disadvantage, that I think we need to give them that extra incentive to get involved here. We're currently working on the 911 bill, the 911 emergency telephone bill, that will take into consideration new technologies that are available, such as texting, being able to text 911 when you may not be able to any other way to communicate with them, to email them, to use your iPad to even to FaceTime with the 911 operator, maybe in the future for us. So to me, that's a big bill that we're doing right now. The Veteran Trust Fund that was established. Hopefully we'll see in the future the Veterans Lottery bill, or the lottery program, into effect that would allow people who want to buy a lottery ticket that supports veteran causes that would be funded through the Veteran Trust Fund program.
There's unique challenges that veterans face, and you and I have sat in the hearing rooms and listened to stories of homelessness, joblessness, substance abuse, men and women who've come back and they have been damaged as a consequence of their experience overseas and serving us. If your heart doesn't tug when you hear those stories, you probably need to check with your cardiologist. For me, it's very moving. And my impression when I approach our committee work is we can't do too much. Mm-hmm. We can't say enough. We can't accolade enough. In your community or in your intersection here with veterans, do you have some favorite crossroads you've had? I know we've had Pearl Harbor survivors here, Korean War survivors and others, and I'm sure you've had those encounters in your own district.
A few years ago, and I wasn't the chairman of the committee back then, we actually had several members of the Band of Brothers showed up. Dick Winters and Bill Guinier and a few of the other guys showed up. Meeting people like that, you know what, it's so nice to see the people that participated in either Pearl Harbor or that anywhere in World War II. Is just, to me, it's just an incredible opportunity, because it really was the war that catapulted America into becoming the world's economic and military superpower like no other country has ever been able to do. And that generation, when you think of, I always talk to my dad about where he was on Pearl Harbor Day. And he always tells the story. He was playing touch football with a bunch of guys, and somebody pulled up in a car and yelled to him that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And that summer, my dad was in the military. He was I remember crying to him about senior week one time. He said, I didn't get senior week. He said 3 days after I was out of school, I was in boot camp in Great Lakes, which is where I went to boot camp. But I mean, meeting the guys that you brought here from Pearl Harbor. The bad part is that we're slowly losing that generation every day. I just had a very good friend of mine whose father, I never knew it, had met him numerous times. He was in Normandy invasion. He was a ranger in the 5th Battalion that was actually, he participated in scaling the walls at Pointe du Hoc. Wow. in Normandy, France. And I don't even think the family understood the courageous act that this man was involved in, and the rest of the Army Rangers that day was just, and to lose him without ever being able to talk to him was very difficult, because I'd met him before, but never knew he was a D-Day, one of the guys that stormed the beaches on D-Day, wow. Which is incredible.
My dad was in a machine gun terror torpedo plane in the South Pacific off the USS Hancock. And he's been gone now over 30 years, but I remember an old Marine looking through his flight log and his papers, came back to me one day, he goes, "Did you know your dad was a hero?" And of course, growing up, you never really think of your fathers or your mothers as being heroes. And of course, the ladies on the munitions side, my mom was very active in supplying the arms. It struck me, and I really never forgot that, because it stunned me that it had not occurred to me when I was growing up. A couple of years ago, in your office, we had 3 Pearl Harbor survivors, and I know you interviewed at least a couple of them. I think this really stresses the importance of honoring these men and women, because it wasn't but a year and a half later that 2 of the 3 had passed away. And we still have 1 left in Berks County. And so We're going to continue this conversation. I really enjoyed it in just a minute. And let's take a quick break. Legislative report will return in a moment.
Did you know that the chamber of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives contains a painting depicting the 24 hours of the day? Located in the center of the ceiling, the mural titled The Hours was created by artist Edwin Austin Abbey. This wonderful masterpiece charts the setting of the sun, moon, and the many stars that grace the heavens. 24 maidens, who each represent an hour of the day, begin each day in light and gladness and ends in solemn drapery carried on still shoulders. Now you know.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. Today we're discussing issues before the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. My guest is Chairman Steve Barrar. Thanks again, Steve. I had a spectacular visit in Delaware County. I believe it was in Media, the museum down there. Tell us a little bit about the treasure and the jewel you have in Delaware County.
Well, the Pennsylvania Veterans Museum, actually I serve on the board of directors for, again, another issue that was very important to me, to make sure that as our veterans get older and our young people, I think, are learning less in school about the military and the wars that basically brought America into this era of greatness that we are today. I think it's important to teach our children the lessons that we've learned from these wars, and as our veteran community, I think, shrinks and gets smaller all the time, it's great to have a place where people can go and learn. The Veterans Museum, it's small right now. They're building on, they have a World War II part of the building. They have Korea War. Now they're working on Vietnam, which is probably one of our most misunderstood conflicts in history. And unfortunately, you know, I look at the Veteran Museum as our place where we can contradict the bad things that a lot of the academics try to teach our children about. You know, American involvement in different conflicts throughout our modern day history. Because I talk to young people all the time, and even when you bring up Vietnam, they know so little about the purpose of Vietnam and what it was about. And the same with World War II. Actually, my daughter came home one time and told me her college professor had told her that the United States is the only country to ever attack another country with a nuclear bomb, but never mentioned that we were at war with that country. Just made it sound like, you know, that we just lobbed a nuke on Japan and just for the heck of it to see what it would do. And so it scares me when I see some of the rewriting of American history. That's a place where we know the factual history of World War II, Korea, Vietnam will get out, and I'm sure sure the war on terror, the Persian Gulf Wars will all be included in it someday. But again, it's a private museum. It's not funded by the state, and we do a lot of fundraising there. I think that's probably where I'm the most valuable to the museum more than anything, is to help them raise money. And we've just had a couple very successful fundraisers for it. But it's also elevating the, I guess you'd say, awareness of that the museum's there and what it does.
Thoroughly enjoyed my visit. I've been in contact with one of the men that I met there as a World War II veteran, and he's got some very stirring memories. We take some trips as a consequence of this committee. It's not just about Delaware County or Berks County or Harrisburg. You have to go out and see what's going on. Fort Indiantown Gap, the old Willow Grove Naval Air Station, been out to Pittsburgh with emergency preparedness. Could you give us a little window inside at least one of those special trips that you've taken? My
favorite was Fort Indiantown Gap. And you go back, there's parts of the fort that still look like it did in World War II, which is a good and bad thing. I love, you know what, if I could just catapult myself back in history, probably the same as you, because you're a real history buff and you really get into this, is to have that opportunity to see parts of our country and what it looked like during World War II. I always go into certain parts of like where in Philadelphia and the Navy shipyard. I always wonder what the activity must have looked like back then in World War II, what it must have been like to work or live right around the Philadelphia Navy Yard back then. And so Fort Indiantown Gap, I think, gives us that look back a little bit. But then again, when getting to see the equipment our men are using, meeting some of the guardsmen that we had the opportunity. I remember talking to one of the guardsmen that was telling me in 10 years he'd been deployed 6 times. A deployment is a year, so and he had children at home, and the sacrifice that these guys give us is so incredible, and it just really touched me when this guy told me in a 10-year period that he'd been deployed 6 times. I just found that incredible. I didn't realize that there were people. I know they're all being called upon to do Herculean task, but I didn't realize 6 years and 6 out of 10 years would be required of I'm sure when he joined the National Guard, never figured out that it was going to be that much of a dedication.
That's extraordinary. We have a debt to them. And yes, I'm interested in windows to the past and history, which is why I go up to the World War II weekend, the first weekend in June. This is your invitation for me on the air. First weekend in June. It's the best amalgamation of reenactors, period aircraft, tanks, everyone in dress uniform wandering about. You're actually able to walk right into the World War II era. But in any event, there's a cost that goes with that. And this is not a commercial, but firefighters. We haven't said a whole lot about them, volunteer firefighters, EMTs. If it were not for the extraordinary effort of our volunteer firefighters especially, we'd be paying much higher property taxes. I think about 97% of the firefighters in Pennsylvania are volunteers. What are we doing to help them? What are they looking for? How can we bolster their efforts and reinforce their ranks as we move ahead in time?
Well, as you remember, last year we got an increase in the grant program to our volunteer firefighter companies and EMTs of $5 million. Not enough, but it was still, you know, when you look at our last year's budget, it was nobody else had gotten that big of an increase in their budget. But there's other things we really need to right now start focusing on recruiting and the retention of our current volunteers and how to recruit new people in. We're going to do some hearings in January on recruiting and retention of volunteer firefighters. There's probably right now in both the Republican and Democrat caucus, there must be at least 20 pieces of legislation that would help us. We're going to bring the members in, ask them to come before the committee, give us a critique of what their legislation does, allow the members to ask questions, prioritize those bills, and then hopefully the leadership will help us in running a package of bills that will be geared solely to recruitment and retention.
That's outstanding. I especially appreciate that work. Just about a mile from my house is a volunteer fire department. They're out there selling Christmas trees. They have hoagie sales. They are doing everything that they can do. And I can't imagine the extraordinary amount of time they're spending away from their families. Of course, some of the families join in on what's going on at the fire department. And the last place I lived in Berks County, once again, we were a couple hundred yards from the volunteer fire department, and something was always going on there. We can't do enough to support them.
Last year we did cancer presumption, which allows a volunteer firefighter to basically put a workers' comp claim in if he gets certain types of cancer and can prove that there was an exposure to carcinogenic along his firefighting career. We just increased the the low interest loans for buying equipment for the fire companies. That just was increased recently. So we are doing things. Unfortunately, they need a lot of the business of fighting fires is very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking, easily $600,000 for a truck today, and helping them, making it easier for them to raise money and come up with the funding they need to stay open, I think should be one of our top priorities here in this committee. And I think you'll see this year and hopefully next year a lot of effort put into that.
As a former borough councilman and municipal official back in Berks County, it was a struggle constantly, and anything the state can do to assist, we're always grateful. Let's just close with a couple thoughts here. You're walking down the street, you're riding your bicycle, you're at the gas station, you're in your district, you're in Delaware County. What are people most likely to come up to you and talk about, either in a contemporary sense recently or at any point in your tenure in the House of Representatives? They say, Representative Barrar or Steve, this concerns me. And I know there's a very wide panorama. So any touchstones as far as what people like to talk about?
Mostly property taxes. There's,
Okay.
since I've been here, we've passed 2 or 3 different property tax bills under Governor Ridge and Governor Rendell. None of them have succeeded in accomplishing the goal of making, basically shifting the burden of funding education. It's really what we're talking about with property tax reform.
Right.
How to fund education. It's a very expensive, proposition to do. And where do you focus your efforts? And unfortunately, we've seen in this economy way too many people losing their homes to foreclosure because first of all their incomes are dropping. We've seen a huge drop in incomes amongst our citizens, and then at the same time their property taxes are going through the roof. At least in my area, they go up every single year.
We're going to make you an honorary member of the Berks County delegation since you're since you're passionate on the issue of property tax. As a matter of fact, I'm going to buy you a ticket to the World War II weekend. Remember, the first weekend in June, we'd love to have you there. Recently, in closing, we passed the transportation bill. And I can remember you telling me that you got a lot of feedback on that particular bill, maybe one component of it, the gas tax increase. It's a difficult economy. People are struggling. And there was probably a sense that they had a somewhat limited capacity to manage the dimension of those increases. Have you heard any more post the bill passing and signing?
Mostly from small business owners,
Okay.
Guys that are landscapers and tow truck operators and small gas station owners. They're the people that are going to be hurt most by this. Because I know in my business, the first thing I did every morning was take several trucks to a gas station, gas them all up, and the impact that this 28 cents a gallon is going to have on our community is going to be very difficult.
There didn't seem to be much debate about the need for the infrastructure upgrade. It was just a methodology.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Barrar. I'll look forward to having you back again.
Great to be here.
On the program. That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen. If you need assistance with any state matter, please feel free to contact me at my local office or through my website. The address and number will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.